A glimpse of humanity. The convoy of sleek black SUVs moved swiftly through the bustling streets of New York City, their tinted windows shielding their occupants from the world outside. Inside one of them sat Barron Trump, tall and composed, scrolling through his phone with a casual air. The hum of the city's life blurred into an indistinct backdrop until a sudden halt jarred the rhythm of their journey. "Traffic jam again," Barron muttered, glancing at Johnson, the head of his security detail. Johnson shrugged. "Construction ahead, sir." Barron sighed, shifting his gaze out of the window. What he saw next made his brow furrow. Near a garbage dump on the roadside sat a frail old man beside a rickety wooden cart. The cart was piled with fruits and vegetables, some bruised, others barely fresh. The man's shoulders were hunched, and his calloused hands trembled as he rearranged the produce, waving at passers-by who ignored him as if he were invisible. The man's eyes caught Barron's attention. They carried a heaviness that stirred something deep within him, a mixture of sadness, resilience, and longing. "Stop the car," Barron said firmly. Johnson hesitated. "Sir, it's not safe." "Just for a minute," Barron insisted. Against protocol, the door opened, and Barron stepped out, his polished shoes meeting the uneven pavement. The smell of decay mingled with the sweetness of overripe fruit as Barron approached the man. Startled, the vendor looked up, his sunken eyes widening at the sight of the towering young figure before him. "Good afternoon," Barron said softly, crouching slightly to meet the man's gaze. "What's your name?" "Emilio," the man croaked, his voice hoarse. He seemed embarrassed, his eyes darting nervously between Barron and the security team standing at a distance. "What are you doing here?" Barron asked, ignoring the curious stares of passers-by. Emilio sighed, his shoulders sagging. "Trying to sell what I can. My family depends on me, but times are hard." Barron noticed Emilio's trembling hands and the weathered lines of his face, signs of a life filled with struggle. He glanced at the dilapidated cart, then at the garbage dump surrounding it. "Does this spot work for you?" Barron asked, his voice tinged with genuine concern. Emilio chuckled bitterly. "No one wants to buy from me, but I can't afford a better place. This is all I have." Barron's chest tightened. There was something profoundly unjust about this scene, and he couldn't just walk away. He straightened up and met Johnson's questioning gaze. "Don't go anywhere, Emilio," Barron said. "I'll be back." A promise of change. Back in the SUV, Barron's mind raced. Johnson leaned forward, his tone cautious. "Sir, I understand your concern, but this isn't your responsibility." "It's not about responsibility," Barron replied sharply. "It's about humanity." He began typing furiously on his phone. "Find me information about nearby shelters, food banks, or programs for struggling vendors," he instructed another guard. Within minutes, they had a lead, a community center 2 blocks away that supported small vendors and families in need. "Let's go," Barron said, determination hardening his voice. Minutes later, they returned to the garbage dump. Emilio looked startled to see Barron again. "I thought you left," he stammered. "I said I'd be back, didn't I?" Barron smiled. He placed a reassuring hand on Emilio's shoulder. "Let's move your cart. You deserve better than this." Emilio hesitated, his uncertainty etched into his weathered face. "Move it where?" he asked cautiously. "To a place where people will actually see you," Barron said. With a nod from Johnson, 2 guards carefully lifted the cart, balancing the fragile produce. As they walked toward the community center, whispers trailed behind them. It wasn't every day people saw a public figure like Barron Trump helping a struggling vendor. Emilio walked hesitantly beside Barron, his eyes filled with a mix of fear and hope. "Why are you doing this?" Emilio asked quietly. Barron paused for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "Because I can," he said simply. "And because I should." A new beginning. When they arrived at the community center, Emilio froze. The bright, clean building was a stark contrast to the garbage dump he had called his marketplace. A group of volunteers greeted them warmly, their faces lighting up at the sight of Barron. "This is where we'll start," Barron said, his voice filled with quiet determination. Inside, the volunteers sprang into action. They offered Emilio a shaded spot near the entrance, where foot traffic was steady. Emilio stood in stunned silence as they helped him arrange his cart. His hands no longer trembled, and his hunched shoulders began to straighten. "What more can we do to help him?" Barron asked the head volunteer, a kind woman named Clara. "We could start a fundraiser," Clara suggested. With some support, Emilio could even grow his own produce instead of scavenging. Barron nodded, his mind already forming a plan. "Let's do it. I'll cover the starting amount." Clara's eyes widened. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," Barron said firmly. Hope rekindled. By the next morning, word of Barron's act of kindness had spread. The community center was abuzz with activity, and Emilio's cart, once ignored, was now surrounded by customers. People bought his fruits and vegetables, not out of pity, but because they saw value in them. Barron returned that afternoon, greeted by applause from the growing crowd. He raised a hand to quiet them. "This isn't about me," he said. "It's about Emilio, and everyone like him who deserves a fair chance." The fundraiser, bolstered by Barron's social media post, gained traction online, and donations poured in from across the country. Emilio watched the growing total with disbelief, tears welling in his eyes. This could change everything," he whispered. Barron placed a hand on his shoulder. "You deserve it, Emilio. But remember, this is just the beginning. The real work starts now." The ripple effect. The community center buzzed with activity, a hive of hope and generosity. Emilio stood at the center of it all, his eyes wide as he watched the volunteers and donors rally around his story. For the first time in years, he felt seen, not as a poor vendor, but as a human being worthy of dignity and compassion. As the fundraiser gained momentum, Emilio pulled Barron aside. "You're doing so much for me," he said, his voice trembling. "But you don't even know who I am." Barron tilted his head. "Then tell me." Emilio hesitated, then took a deep breath. "I wasn't always like this. My wife and I had a small farm once. We grew the best crops in our village. People used to line up to buy from us." His voice wavered, and he looked at the ground. Then, one year, a storm destroyed everything. The farm, the equipment, even the house. We tried to rebuild, but the debt kept piling up. My wife fell sick, and I sold everything to pay for her treatment. Barron listened intently, his chest tightening at the man's raw honesty. "She passed away anyway," Emilio whispered, tears streaming down his face. "After that, I gave up. I've been barely surviving ever since." "You didn't give up," Barron said firmly. "You're still here, still fighting. That takes strength." Emilio shook his head. "I don't know what to do with this. Second chance. What if I fail again?" Barron placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You won't be doing this alone. We'll make sure of it. A family united." As the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a warm golden glow over the city, another sleek black SUV pulled up outside the community center. The crowd turned as an elegant woman stepped out, her presence commanding attention. It was Melania Trump, her poised demeanor radiating both warmth and determination. "Mom," Barron said, his eyebrows raising in surprise. "What are you doing here?" Melania smiled gently and placed a hand on his shoulder. "I heard about what you're doing, Barron. I wanted to see it for myself, and to help." The crowd parted as Melania approached Emilio, who froze, unsure of how to react to such attention. "Mrs. Trump," he stammered, bowing his head slightly. "There's no need for formalities," she said softly. "I'm here to support what my son has started." Emilio blinked, his emotions threatening to overwhelm him. "I don't know how to thank you," he said quietly. Melania turned to Barron. What you've done is incredible, but I think we can take this further." Barron raised an eyebrow. "What do you have in mind?" Melania's expression was thoughtful. "It's not enough to help one person. We need to create something lasting, something that will uplift more people like Emilio." Planting seeds of change. Over the next few weeks, the Trumps worked together to transform Emilio's story into a movement. They partnered with local organizations to establish a program called Roots of Hope, aimed at empowering struggling vendors and small farmers. The initiative provided access to microloans, training in sustainable farming practices, and designated market spaces in urban areas. Emilio became the face of the campaign, his story a beacon of resilience and possibility. He spoke at community events, sharing his journey from despair to hope. His words moved audiences, inspiring them to support the cause. "Every seed you plant," Emilio said during one speech, "has the potential to grow into something extraordinary. You just need the right soil, water, and sunlight." For me, that soil was kindness, the water was opportunity, and the sunlight was hope. As donations poured in, Emilio began to dream again. He used part of the fundraiser's proceeds to lease a small plot of land on the outskirts of the city. With the help of volunteers from the community center, he planted rows of tomatoes, peppers, and herbs. For the first time since losing his farm, he felt the joy of working the land again. A community transformed. The impact of Roots of Hope rippled across the city. Vendors who once struggled to make ends meet now had access to better resources and locations. Farmers in rural areas received training and support to improve their yields. The program's success attracted national attention, inspiring similar initiatives in other cities. For Barron, the experience was transformative. He spent more time at the community center, getting to know the people whose lives were being changed. He listened to their stories, each one a testament to the power of resilience and the importance of compassion. "I thought I was coming here to help," Barron said during a press conference, "but I've learned more from Emilio and this community than I could ever teach them. Kindness isn't just an act, it's a responsibility." Melania, too, became deeply involved, using her platform to advocate for policies supporting small businesses and low-income families. Together, she and Barron proved that change starts with simple acts of kindness. The harvest of hope. Months later, Emilio stood in his new market stall, a proud smile on his face as customers lined up to buy his freshly harvested produce. The once frail man now exuded strength and confidence, his hand steady as he weighed fruits and counted change. Barron and Melania visited the stall one sunny afternoon, their faces lighting up at the sight of Emilio's success. "Look at this place," Barron said, gesturing to the bustling market around them. "You've built something incredible." Emilio chuckled. "I couldn't have done it without you." Barron shook his head. "You would have found a way. We just helped you get started." Emilio's eyes softened. "You didn't just give me a chance. You gave me hope. And that's something I'll never forget." The story of Emilio and Barron's act of kindness became a symbol of what could be achieved when people chose compassion over indifference. It reminded the world that no act of kindness, no matter how small, was ever wasted. Barron, reflecting on the journey, often said, "The world is full of people like Emilio, people who just need someone to believe in them. If we all did our part, imagine how much better this world could be." The initiative continued to grow, touching lives across the nation. And for Emilio, every tomato he harvested, every pepper he sold, was a testament to the power of kindness, resilience, and the belief that even in the darkest times, hope could be rekindled. Epilogue. Years later, Emilio's farm had expanded, employing dozens of workers and supplying fresh produce to markets across the city. Roots of Hope had become a national movement, credited with lifting thousands out of poverty. And in the heart of New York City, a plaque outside the community center read, "In honor of the seeds of kindness planted here, may they continue to grow and nourish the world." Barron Trump often visited the community center, his presence a reminder of what one act of kindness could inspire. For him, Emilio's story wasn't just a chapter in his life. It was the foundation of a legacy of compassion and change. A legacy of light. Months turned into years, and roots of hope flourished beyond anyone's expectations. Emilio's success story became a shining example of what compassion, opportunity, and resilience could achieve. But as the program grew, so did its challenges. Barron and Emilio both realized that sustaining such a monumental effort required more than resources. It demanded adaptability, leadership, and unwavering determination. A new challenge. One crisp autumn morning, Barron sat in a conference room surrounded by his Roots of Hope leadership team. The initiative had expanded into rural areas and urban centers across the country, supporting thousands of vendors and farmers. But recent reports painted a troubling picture. Supply chain issues, rising costs of farming equipment, and uneven participation were creating bottlenecks. Clara, the head volunteer who had been instrumental in launching the program, spoke up. "We're seeing some vendors struggle to adapt to the new systems, and in rural areas, transportation of produce to city markets has become a major issue." Barron rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "What do you suggest?" "We need partnerships with logistics companies," Clara replied. "And we should consider training programs to help vendors learn business management. It's one thing to provide resources, but education is the key to long-term success." Barron nodded. "You're right. If we don't address these gaps, we're just putting a Band-Aid on the problem." The conversation left him energized, but also reflective. He knew that building a legacy wasn't just about launching a movement. It was about ensuring it endured for generations. Emilio's vision. Meanwhile, Emilio's life had undergone a complete transformation. His farm was thriving, his produce was sold in multiple markets, and he had become a mentor to other struggling vendors. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to give back even more. One evening, as he and Barron walked through the rows of crops on his farm, Emilio shared his thoughts. "You've done so much for me, Barron, but I want to take this further. I've been thinking about starting a co-op." Barron raised an eyebrow. "A co-op?" "Yes," Emilio said, his voice filled with conviction. "A place where small farmers like me can pool resources, share equipment, and collectively sell our produce. It would lower costs and increase bargaining power." Barron smiled. "That's a brilliant idea. And it fits perfectly with what Roots of Hope is all about. Do you think we can make it happen?" Emilio asked, his eyes searching Barron's face. "We've already made the impossible possible," Barron replied. "This is just the next step." The co-op takes root. The launch of Emilio's co-op was a community-wide event. Farmers from neighboring towns gathered to learn about the initiative, and volunteers from Roots of Hope provided training sessions on sustainable farming and cooperative management. The co-op became a hub of activity, brimming with energy and optimism. Emilio took on a leadership role, overseeing operations and mentoring new members. He found joy not only in his own success, but also in helping others rise above their struggles. The co-op's impact was immediate. Members saw reduced costs, higher profits, and a renewed sense of camaraderie. Barron, who attended the co-op's opening ceremony, was struck by the transformation. The once frail vendor he had met near a garbage dump was now a confident leader, inspiring others to believe in their own potential. "This is your legacy, Emilio," Barron said during his speech at the event. "You've shown us all what's possible when we work together." And in the hearts of everyone who had been touched by Roots of Hope, the message was clear. Even the smallest seed of kindness could grow into a forest of change. A forest of change. Decades later, Roots of Hope had become a cornerstone of global humanitarian efforts. Emilio's grandchildren worked alongside Barron's family to continue the legacy. Together, they ensured that the values of compassion and resilience were passed down to future generations. On a quiet morning, Emilio stood at the edge of his farm, now a sprawling estate filled with vibrant crops. As the sun rose, He smiled, knowing that the seeds of kindness planted years ago had blossomed into something extraordinary. And somewhere, a new generation prepared to carry the torch, ready to prove that hope, like the earth itself, could nourish the world endlessly. A lesson in humanity. Years after Roots of Hope began, its impact was undeniable. Emilio's farm was no longer just a place to grow crops. It had become a symbol of resilience and a training ground for new farmers. The co-op he spearheaded thrived, its members proudly supporting their families and communities. Barron, now a global advocate for humanitarian efforts, often looked back on that fateful day near the garbage dump as the moment that transformed not just Emilio's life, but his own. One quiet afternoon, Barron and Emilio sat on a bench overlooking the flourishing fields of the co-op. The sky was painted with the golden hues of sunset, and the air was alive with the hum of activity as workers tended to the crops. "You know," Emilio said, breaking the silence, "if you hadn't stopped that day, I don't know where I'd be." Barron smiled, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "I didn't just stop for you, Emilio. I stopped because I saw myself in you. You reminded me that no matter how much privilege or power we have, we're all human, and humans need each other." Emilio nodded, his eyes glistening. "You taught me to dream again, Barron. And now I see others dreaming because of what we've built together." Barron turned to him, his expression thoughtful. "It wasn't me who taught you to dream, Emilio. You already had that spark inside you. All I did was give it a chance to grow." Scaling new heights. As Roots of Hope continued to grow, Barron faced new challenges in balancing his personal life and his commitment to the initiative. Despite his high-profile status, he remained deeply involved, often visiting community centers and co-ops unannounced to see their progress firsthand. One such visit took him to a rural town where a young girl named Sophia approached him. Clutching a basket of freshly picked strawberries, she said, "Thank you, Mr. Barron. My papa says we can send me to school now because of the co-op." Barron knelt to her level, his heart swelling with emotion. "You're very welcome, Sophia. What do you want to be when you grow up?" "A teacher," she said, her eyes shining, "so I can help other kids like me." That moment solidified Barron's resolve. He realized that Roots of Hope wasn't just about economic empowerment. It was about creating opportunities for future generations. A global vision. With the program's success in the United States, Barron and his team began exploring ways to take Roots of Hope to a global stage. They partnered with international organizations to bring the initiative to developing countries, where small farmers face similar challenges. Emilio joined Barron on a trip to Kenya, where they visited a village that had adopted the co-op model. Watching the local farmers thrive reminded Emilio of his own journey. He spoke to them through a translator, sharing his story and encouraging them to persevere. "Kindness knows no borders," Emilio said during a community gathering. "It started with one act of compassion, and now it's spreading across the world." A lasting legacy. Years later, Roots of Hope had become a global movement, transforming the lives of millions. Emilio's co-op had grown into a network of thriving farms, and he continued to mentor aspiring farmers. Barron, now a prominent advocate for humanitarian causes, reflected on how far they had come. During the 10th anniversary of Roots of Hope, Barron stood on a stage in front of a massive crowd. Beside him were Emilio and Clara, as well as other leaders who had helped shape the initiative. "This all started with one man and one cart of bruised fruit," Barron said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "It taught me that no act of kindness is too small to change the world." Emilio's story is a testament to the power of hope, resilience, and community. And it's a reminder that we all have the ability and the responsibility to make a difference. As the crowd erupted into applause, Barron looked at Emilio, whose eyes glistened with tears of gratitude. They had turned a moment of compassion into a movement of transformation. And in the hearts of everyone who had been touched by Roots of Hope, the message was clear. Even the smallest seed of kindness could grow into a forest of change. A forest of change. Decades later, Roots of Hope had become a cornerstone of global humanitarian efforts. Emilio's grandchildren worked alongside Barron's family to continue the legacy. Together, they ensured that the values of compassion and resilience were passed down to future generations. On a quiet morning, Emilio stood at the edge of his farm, now a sprawling estate filled with vibrant crops. As the sun rose, he smiled, knowing that the seeds of kindness planted years ago had blossomed into something extraordinary. And somewhere, a new generation prepared to carry the torch, ready to prove that hope, like the earth itself, could nourish the world endlessly. A lesson in humanity. Years after Roots of Hope began, its impact was undeniable. Emilio's farm was no longer just a place to grow crops. It had become a symbol of resilience and a training ground for new farmers. The co-op he spearheaded thrived, its members proudly supporting their families and communities. Barron, now a global advocate for humanitarian efforts, often looked back on that fateful day near the garbage dump as the moment that transformed not just Emilio's life, but his own. One quiet afternoon, Barron and Emilio sat on a bench overlooking the flourishing fields of the co-op. The sky was painted with the golden hues of sunset, and the air was alive with the hum of activity as workers tended to the crops. "You know," Emilio said, breaking the silence, "if you hadn't stopped that day, I don't know where I'd be." Barron smiled, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "I didn't just stop for you, Emilio. I stopped because I saw myself in you. You reminded me that no matter how much privilege or power we have, we're all human, and humans need each other." Emilio nodded, his eyes glistening. "You taught me to dream again, Barron. And now I see others dreaming because of what we've built together." Barron turned to him, his expression thoughtful. "It wasn't me who taught you to dream, Emilio. You already had that spark inside you. All I did was give it a chance to grow." The greater lesson. As the years went on, Roots of Hope became more than a program. It became a philosophy embraced by people across the globe. It taught communities the importance of helping one another, of lifting those who had fallen, and of believing in the potential of every individual. The greatest lesson of all, however, came from the simplest truth. Kindness is contagious. One act of compassion, like a single seed, could grow into a tree that provided shelter, nourishment, and hope for countless others. Barron often reflected on the experience in his speeches, sharing this insight. We live in a world that's too often divided by what we have and what we don't have. But humanity isn't about wealth or power. It's about seeing the value in every person, no matter their circumstances. Helping Emilio wasn't a grand act of charity. It was a small act of justice. And justice, fueled by kindness, has the power to change the world. A new generation carries the torch. As Emilio grew older, he passed the torch to the next generation. His grandchildren, inspired by his story, worked alongside Roots of Hope to ensure its mission endured. They traveled to villages, cities, and countries, spreading the message that no one was beyond help and no one was invisible. Barron, now a seasoned advocate for global change, watched with pride as young leaders carried forward the movement he had helped start. His own children were among them, eager to continue the legacy of compassion and action. A final reflection. On the 25th anniversary of Roots of Hope, a special event was held at the community center where it all began. Emilio, now retired, attended with his family. The once frail vendor now stood tall, surrounded by people whose lives had been changed because of him. Barron addressed the crowd, his voice steady and filled with emotion. "What started with a single cart near a garbage dump has grown into something I could never have imagined. This isn't just Emilio's story or my story. It's all of ours. It's proof that the smallest acts can create the biggest ripples. And it's a reminder that every one of us has the power to make a difference." As the crowd erupted into applause, Emilio stood and embraced Barron. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. Barron smiled. "Thank you, Emilio, for showing the world that hope is never lost." The story of Barron and Emilio teaches us that no matter how small a gesture might seem, it can change lives. Compassion isn't just about giving. It's about seeing others as equals, deserving of dignity and opportunity. In a world that often feels divided, their story reminds us of a universal truth. The seeds of kindness we plant today will grow into forests of hope for generations to come. And as long as we remember that, the world will always have a chance to heal, to grow, and to thrive. This conclusion ties the narrative into a meaningful and universal lesson, leaving readers with a sense of hope and the motivation to make a difference in their own lives and communities. This concludes the story. Thank you for watching until the end. I hope you found it enjoyable. If you did, please consider liking the video and sharing it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell for more captivating stories. Have a great day.